COL is the only Commonwealth intergovernmental organization outside the UK and was established when heads of government met for CHOGM in Vancouver in 1987. We were set up to support Commonwealth member states and institutions to use distance learning and technologies for increasing access to education and training. This visionary idea has grown and flowered, especially during the pandemic, when distance learning was embraced globally. COL works in two sectors, education and skills, with gender as a cross-cutting theme. We leverage new and existing technologies to achieve impact. Let me share 6 examples of how we use technologies to address the issues that emerged during the pandemic. Under the COL Coursera Workforce Recovery Initiative, COL offered free training opportunities to 150,000 youth around the Commonwealth. Even though connectivity was often a challenge, learners used mobile devices or library facilities in what has been a life-changing experience for thousands. Here's what a graduate from Ghana has to say.
Taking part in the Coursera Workforce Recovery Program has helped me expand my knowledge on subject areas that are of professional and educational interest. These with certificates have made me a more valuable candidate in the job place. Thank you.
During this time, COL trained over 40,000 women and girls in skills for livelihoods in Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Mozambique, Sri Lanka, and Tanzania in financial literacy and technical skills using smartphones and basic mobile devices. The girls from Mozambique and Bangladesh share their experience.
Não foi fácil para mim ter que estudar e cuidar dos meus filhos. Graças às palestras que o projeto Girl Inspire davam às mulheres, me encorajou a não desistir e assim consegui me formar e realizar o meu sonho.
বলতে চাই যে মেয়েরা এবং মহিলারা মোটেও বোঝা নয়। তারা যথাযথ প্রশিক্ষণ এবং যথাযথ শিক্ষা পেলে তারাও সম্পদে পরিণত হতে পারে।
In an effort to help young women and girls remain motivated during this difficult time, COL launched CommonwealthWiseWomen.org. This mentoring program links eminent women to girls in remote regions using a range of technologies, including WhatsApp. This is how a young mentee from Pakistan benefited.
Commonwealth Wise Women Mentorship Program connected me with Professor Zoraini Abbas, my mentor from Malaysia. It connected me with someone that I can say now I look up to, and I can say with utmost respect is an inspiration for me. Through my journey with Professor Abbas, I learned how to engage with the people around me and with the community around me.
Many teachers needed training in using technology. COL has been offering a series of massive open online courses where over 58,000 teachers were trained. A teacher from Sierra Leone has this to say.
Due to the support from the Commonwealth of Learning, I have been able to mentor teachers at the junior secondary school, and my colleagues and I have also engaged teachers in the technology-based communities of practice and have mentored and provided them supportive supervision. In addition, the Commonwealth of Learning have provided us training in the podcast.
COL also developed video-on-demand service in science subjects aligned to the curriculum of Fiji, Nauru, Samoa, and Tonga. The Honorable Minister of Education, Samoa, found this very helpful for low bandwidth contexts.
Such an innovations could not have come at a better time, as all Pacific nations are struggling to meet the technology demands of the pandemic era.
When pandemics strike, it's the most vulnerable who are further disadvantaged. COL has been building the capacity of staff who work with persons with disabilities so that no one is left behind. This speech therapist in Mauritius benefited from this training.
In a country like Mauritius, where disability is still an evolving sector, I believe I have a vital role to play as an advocate for those with a disability. My clinical decision-making skills are becoming more effective, and the newly acquired knowledge in using different types of assistive technologies is making a huge difference in the lives of my patients.
Many of our small states suffer from climate-related disasters. Working with a partner in Jamaica, COL raised awareness and built local capacity for disaster preparedness. Let's listen to the impact this is having.
This is the initiative that we are using to go into the communities, find out what the weak spots are, and help them to address them so that they're all stronger and more resilient. In this regard, strategic partnerships like the one that we have established with the Commonwealth of Learning, COL, has helped us considerably where making our communities more aware and more educated is concerned. So we are forever indebted and very grateful to the partnership that we have with the Commonwealth of Learning, for without them, we would never be able to reach our communities as widely and as deeply as we do.
COL works for the common future of our Commonwealth by promoting learning for sustainable development, supporting innovations for affordable and accessible technologies, and serving the last person in the queue.
As we are embarking then on a new era, in one sense, yes, we have revised the standards, but to the extent that the entire world has changed for us, and I mean that literally and figuratively. So the world has changed for us, and in fact, all of us, we are searching for a new normal. For those of us who have been in distance education for some time, we never anticipated that the type of increase and pursuit of distance education modalities and delivery systems would have accelerated at the type of pace that we're now experiencing. And even today, as we are now taking for granted the type of web conferencing features and being able to meet across the globe and to launch ceremonies and to have webinars, we are conscious still that in our country, in our beloved Jamaica, and certainly in other places of the world, that we are still trying to put everything together in terms of a jigsaw puzzle, all right? And so as we listen to each person in turn, we want to always think through how best can I navigate the system. So at this point, I want to invite Dr. Dawn Barrett-Adams, our accreditation officer from the UCJ, to share an overview of the distance education standards. And even as she'll come now online, I just want to pause and to acknowledge Mrs. Karen Gale from the UCJ, who has also been the standards officer and who has helped us in reaching this far in terms of establishing the standards. So at this point, Dr. Adams, we invite you to give that overview. Thank you.
Honorable Chairman of the proceedings, the launch, Dr. Jeanette Bartley-Bryan, Professor Errol Morris, the Chairman of the UCJ, Mrs. Althea Heron, Executive Director of the UCJ, Dr. Marriott Newman from Commonwealth of Learning, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And of course, my colleagues from the UCJ. Now let me extend apology on behalf of Mrs. Karen Gale, who unfortunately could not make it this morning and would like to be here, especially given that she has been the one behind driving this whole standards development and certainly the distance education standards. I know I cannot do it justice as she would have done, but I will try to fit in as best as I can. So today we're very happy at the UCJ to be launching our distance education standards. As Dr. Bryan indicated earlier, this is our second revision, our second edition of these standards. But before I go into that, I would like to perhaps just, oops, I'm not getting it. Oh, start off by saying that, you know, the University Council of Jamaica is our external quality assurance agency in Jamaica. And certainly our mission is to facilitate and oversee the development and maintenance of a robust higher education quality assurance system. Now, there are many definitions for quality assurance, but one of the things that I want to highlight today is that we speak about confidence that a provision fulfills expectations or meets required standards. And so before we can begin to think about doing any evaluation, doing any determination of, you know, quality, we have to define the standards. And so standards development is a prerequisite for quality assurance. It forms the foundation for the whole, you know, judging quality and making decisions about quality. And so as I go through, you will see the different definitions here, which speaks to requirements, which speaks to standards when we're looking at quality. Now, of course, institutions are foremost the responsible entity for standards. So they would use and they would judge their own programs as they develop, look at, you know, benchmark against international standards, benchmark against local standards, certainly benchmark in terms of what the industry requires. And they would now set up their internal quality assurance system where they have these checks. So are the graduates meeting the standards for the workplace? Are the graduates meeting the international standards for the discipline? Is the institution meeting the standards for higher education? And certainly the UCJ comes in and we go in and we blow a stamp of approval. So in order to ensure that our institutions have resources and are able to judge what we're going to be evaluating them against, the UCJ, like other external quality assurance agencies, develop standards. And I just go through this quickly to just really go to the whole standards development. So standards development play a pivotal role in terms of our mandate here at the UCJ. And of course, today we're looking at the distance education standards. So we have quite a number of standards that we offer. We have standards for university college. We have standards for our POA processes, registration, IA, program accreditation. We have discipline-specific standards. So we have standards for, we have generic standards for bachelor's degree. We have generic standards for occupational degrees. We have generic standards for master's degree, but we also have discipline-specific standards. So when we look at business administration, we have science, and we have a various number of standards that are used by the higher education institutions as they plan their programs. And certainly COVID now has pushed us into online, and so our distance education standards become critical at this point. Just to note too, that as we look at these standards, we're also looking at increasing enrollment in higher education, and certainly online delivery and distance education provides that opportunity. So we can increase access and increase participation in higher education. Again, expanding access, alternative pathways, and optimizing the resources as we work towards empowering our Jamaicans to achieve their fullest potential. And there have been a number of developments in higher education in Jamaica, certainly in terms of the 7-year high school expansion program, the CAP, etc. And we all have to now judge these against the standards. So today, and we have partnered with a number of institutions, but today, before I talk about the standards a little bit, I want to express our gratitude, and I want to just perhaps name these persons who have been pivotal in the revised standards, who have been at the meetings and who have driven the process. Of course, Mrs. Mrs. Karen Gale was the one behind all of this, but these persons have really given their commitment and time and talent to the preparation of these standards. We have Dr. Jeanette Bartley-Bryan, who's our chair this morning, Mrs. Avery Thompson. She's from the Northern Caribbean University. We also want to acknowledge Dr. William Shakespeare from the University of Technology in the Faculty of Education and Liberal Studies. Dr. Chantal Moore, she's a coordinator for the School of Education at the University of the West Indies. Certainly Dr. Marriott Newman, who's with us from the Commonwealth of Learning, and to whom we're very grateful for being, a stalwart and a great support in not only the development of these standards, but also in the launch that we're here together, sharing in. We have Mrs. Shanique Walker from the Council of Community Colleges. We also want to thank Mrs. Erica Simmons from the Caribbean Maritime University, Mrs. Jeanette Clacken from the Caribbean Examinations Council, Mrs. Charlene Robinson from the Ministry of Education and Youth and now, and Mrs. Sandra Bloomfield from the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean. Now, as I said earlier, as we work through our standards, we pull on not just our local expertise, but we also pull on international. And so these standards have been benchmarked against international standards. And so today we are launching our standards for distance education. And just to, just give a short overview in terms of what is contained in these standards. Certainly, we have given a background to the standards. We have highlighted governance because governance forms that incubator, and this is one of the criteria that we have to look at as we develop standards. So not only develop standards, but also in terms of our distance education, because you have to have the support of governance, the administration, the admin. There has to be the policies in place within the institution. And so these guidelines provide that, our standards provide the requirements for that. So we have the criterion of governance. We also look at the academic programs. How do you ensure, and I heard Prof speak about, ensuring that that student is the student that is getting the award. And certainly we know our students from, once we meet them, we start interacting with them, we know how they write, we know, a lot of things about them as we engage with them. So certainly looking at our academic program, how it's developed, and the assessment and learner support services would help us to work through and be able to know that this student is the student that is doing the program. Again, we give standards for the learner engagement, assessment, and achievement and satisfaction. Certainly the human resource management that is necessary for this. And of course, we can't leave out the tech people as well, because it's very important, especially when you're looking at online. We have different modalities for distance education, but certainly online, we need to have a very strong IT support system and the kind of resources that is going to be required to drive it. We also look at financial management too, as the standards lay out what are the requirements. And as you go through the pages too, advertising and promotion, so how you go about advertising and promoting this, your distance education programs. And certainly research and development, this is a key component. And if I may, we had a consultation last year during our Quality Assurance Week. I don't know how many persons remember when we had that stakeholder consultation, because that's also an important component of us launching our standards. And we dedicated a whole day to different persons looking at the different areas in the document and giving the feedback. And this is the feedback. We have now pulled that together to edit and to now today present these standards. The glossary of terms, again, we want, that is also giving more definition to, as you read through the standards, what each terms that you might encounter means. And of course, our references as well. So at the UCJ, just to recap, standards is very critical. We can't even judge quality without standards. And so it is very important, and we're very happy for the persons and for all the institutions who actually participated in the stakeholder consultation during our Quality Assurance Week 2021. And we really acknowledge your contribution and certainly what you have enabled us to do in terms of launching these standards today. So without, taking much from the other sessions that will come, I will end here and we'll take it from there. Thank you very, very much.
Sometimes I'm lost and far from home, but I find my way. I follow my heart, I know I'll be found someday. While I'm lost, I learn and live. What do you say? Let's have a good time until that day. Oh, every morning I rise, I stare at the sun. I know it is a blessing. So when the evening comes, I lift up my eyes to the hills. I'm blessed, oh man. With my two hands in the air as far as I can. Oh, 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 If you hear this message, wherever you stand, calling every woman, calling every man, we're the generation can't afford to wait. The future started yesterday, and we're already late. We've been looking for a song to sing, search for a melody, search for someone to lead. We've been looking for the world to change. If you feel the same, well, go on and say, if you're out there, sing along with me. If you're out there, I'm dying to believe that you're out there. Stand up and say it loud if you're out there. Tomorrow's starting now if you're out there. Sing along with me if you're out there. I'm dying to believe that you're out there. Stand up and say it loud if you're out there. Tomorrow's starting now. If you hear this message, wherever you stand, calling every woman, calling every man, we're the generation can't afford to wait. The future started yesterday, we're already late.
Thank you very much, Mr. White, for that interlude. And I just want to share with all persons, we are now seeing 96 persons online, and that's in addition to our persons gathered here at the R Hotel in New Kingston. So we thank everyone for being with us here at the launch. And at this moment, I want to invite then our chairman of the University Council of Jamaica, Professor the Honorable Errol Morrison, to do his declaration. Thank you.
Morning again to everyone. Madam Chair, I think Minister might have, left us. But all distinguished members and participants, it is a unique moment, one that I think is not only timely, but long, long overdue. And in declaring the launch of this program, let me just express best wishes that our participants and stakeholders will leave our considerations fully empowered to implement and apply in their varied institutions. And with that said, to you all, blessings and bestest of everything.
Thank you, Professor Morrison. So colleagues, we have heard it. And thanks again to all those persons who have been working over maybe the past 3 years, giving feedback and in some cases testing some of these standards so that today we can confirm and accept as the Professor, the Honorable Errol Morrison declared them now ready not only for use, but for improving our quality delivery. At this stage, we will consider the launch event to have been duly implemented. And so we are going to take a break, about a half an hour, as we prepare for the webinar, the first of the webinar series to share the standards with different target groups, to invite persons to have the dialogue as we interpret the standards, look at the importance, look at the implications for compliance, and for examining really how best we can improve our own experiences as we incorporate these standards. So as of now, regardless of the time that your watch shows, we will count 30 minutes, and then we invite persons online and here at our gathering to join us again for this first webinar today. And it will look at establishing and maintaining quality governance framework for online distance higher education. Thereafter, on our return, we'll also share about the upcoming webinars for Monday morning and Monday afternoon, and 2 other topics in the series, looking at other standards and the criteria. But at this point, folks, thank you again very much. And let's take a mental, physical, and emotional break in various ways. Thanks again. See you in half an hour time.
I am particularly pleased to be introducing the presenter for today's webinar, webinar number 1, Dr. Jeanette Bartley. Dr. Bartley-Bryan is the Associate Vice President for Open and Distance Learning at the University of Technology, Jamaica. She has contributed her practical experience and expertise to several technical work groups, including the Commonwealth of Learning's Quality Assurance Toolkit for Distance Higher Education, Global Development Learning Network for Latin America and the Caribbean. Additionally, Dr. Bartley-Bryan has contributed to the formation and leadership of several work groups, including the National Task Force for the pilot of the Jamaican Research Education Network, the Caribbean Universities Project for integration of distance education, but most importantly, the University Council of Jamaica's national standards for distance education, for which she served as chair of the committee. Dr. Bartley-Bryan has been working for over 35 years with Caribbean and North American institutions. Her primary focus is on the development of indigenous, innovative educational materials with technology-mediated programs for local and regional cultures with a practical application for the global environment. And Dr. Bartley-Bryan would have received assistance from Mrs. Ritwa Smith. Mrs. Smith is an educator with over 20 years experience. She holds a Master's of Educational Technology from the University of British Columbia. Currently, she heads the ICT and Online Education Department at the Shortwood Teachers College, where among many other responsibilities, she guides the institution in the delivery of courses online. Through the infusion of computer and web-based technologies in the courses she teaches, she has been instrumental in helping to prepare students to effectively integrate technology in the teaching and learning process. Her passion is driven by a philosophy to be a knowledgeable facilitator of educational technology, one who creates environments to help her learners in technology utilization and its impact in order that they are able to enhance the use of higher level skills of students to function in advanced modes within the society. Dr. Bartley-Bryan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wilson. And it is my pleasure to share on the first set of standards, and just want to acknowledge even Ms. Wilson's support in getting here this morning, getting to this stage. Yes, in presenting, we want to acknowledge the contribution, as Ms. Wilson mentioned, yes, of Mrs. Ritwa Smith, who is online. And so that's my partner in this area. So for today, we are looking at establishing and maintaining quality governance framework for online distance higher education. And it is deliberate that we also just insert hybrid blended there, because many institutions have now to be considering what we consider the new normal, how to make the best of all the worlds that we are now involved in. So it is not necessarily fully online, fully face-to-face, fully of anything, but it is really balancing the mix in this jigsaw puzzle of life. And so join me as we press ahead. We will now look at 3 of the 9 criteria that are considered the standards for distance education. Today, we are looking at governance, human resource management, and financial management. So definitely we are targeting what we say the top tier leadership of the institution. And that includes from all executive managers, senior managers, all heads of division, and all who would play a leadership role even beyond titles. We want to set the tone. We want to speak to how the institution will move ahead now after 2 years and 3 months of COVID, that it cannot just be survival. It cannot just be business as usual. We now have to put on our strategic hats and look carefully at the sustainability of the institution. So this is for the top tier leadership, but also for all those who are online who lead in various ways, even without titles. So what I will invite us to do is to just quickly go through the set of standards, which will include what we call criteria, indicators, and evidence. I pause here at this first screen because even as we go through each standard criteria, each indicator, we want to see beyond just a list. We want to know that each point, each item is critical to the work that we do. And so I invite you, as you go with me through this journey, as institutional leaders, to immediately say, is my institution excellent in this? Is it good? Is it fair? Or do we need improvement? Or is this particular standard or indicator non-existent? Feel comfortable that it's about a learning journey, because we'll not ask you to give us your actual ratings, all right? So that will be your secret. But as UCJ will remind us, it's not about standards that are prescriptive. It's really for us to measure. And if we can't measure, then we can't improve. And I know that's one of the main principles of quality. So we want today to just think and reflect as we go along through each standard. And if you do not yet have it at the stage or the level that it is being effective in your organization, then apart from just saying, ouch, then make sure that you prioritize it because it has to be addressed. Okay, thank you. So for governance, we say it's the scope. The scope is that the institution has clearly defined its mission, vision, goals, governance structure, and management systems that incorporate all modalities and provision for distance education, taking into consideration flexible delivery, including use of extension sites, which emphasize commitment to quality in teaching and learning. I took the time to read every word of that scope, because immediately we'll say, but I have a vision, I have a mission, we have goals. But now in 2022, is your vision, mission, goal, or goals reflecting the type of modality or the type of delivery system that must be in place? Okay? I remind persons, when technology works, we forget it. We don't even think about it. When it doesn't work, as we experience now every day, we have to think about it. And this is what has been facing us in Jamaica for 2 years and 3 months. All right? Everything has not worked. Everything is not working. So from the vision and the mission, as institutional leaders, we have to highlight, pay attention, and put in place the strategies to address it. It will not go away. We're not all just swinging back to 100% face-to-face, because even the face-to-face environment, we will be incorporating aspects of technology. So let's look at some of the indicators that make up this criteria. The order, and you would have had full copies of the standards, all right, all 9. Today we're just looking at 3. So for this first one, yes, what constitutes a clearly defined mission and goals and all of that, which is a standard on the left side. Let us look. We're saying that the vision and mission statements must be clearly defined and communicated to all relevant stakeholders. So if a person assisting us in the office, I would dare say the gardener in the front of your institution who keep our grounds so well, if they are not aware of the movement or lack of movement now on our campuses, then it means that we have not communicated well enough. And so please rate yourself, rate your institution. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5 being the highest. Excellent. For this standard, we also looked at the goals are clearly defined, related yesterday, vision, mission, and relevance to the needs of the institutional context, to the program and the intended target population. Is your target population just to get all persons who used to come in face-to-face on the campus? Or are you now looking beyond across Jamaica, across the Caribbean and elsewhere? It means that your goals also have to reflect that and reflect this intent, because it makes a difference to planning, resource allocation, and a number of things. All right, and the evidence that will guide us that you are practicing what you preach will be the mission statement, the vision statement. It must show some reference to the modalities, right? The strategic plans. And so what is outlined in each standard is really suggestions in terms of evidence, what we would consider the primary artifacts that any accreditation agency would be looking at. But the list of evidence is not exhaustive, because each institution will decide and design how best they go about from an organizational strategic position, right, to achieve the standard. So as I say, what is shared here in this document, what UCJ reminds us, is that these are things they'll be looking at, but it's prescriptive, and your organizational context guides your combination of strategies to achieve the standard. Okay, so next we would look at second criteria here. Well, the criterion is that there's a governing body, senior administrators have sound reputations, record of integrity, ethical conduct in professional activities, business operations, and relationships across national and international borders. So just in case we think that we were just regurgitating the institutional accreditation standards, when it comes down to the distance education one, we now factor in the geographical spread, and that must be considered. So how do you achieve that? We look at the policies for maintenance of ethical standards in all aspects of the institution's operations. And then we look at the type of periodic evaluation of the effectiveness of institutional leadership and governance systems. relating to distance education. So no leader can just delegate this responsibility to the head of the distance education unit. Institutional leaders will be held accountable as part of good governance. And so there's a list of artifacts you can provide as evidence, but again, without looking through documents, it must be seen, felt, and heard, and your students and all supporting faculty and central units must be clear that from the top, this is a priority. Let's just look at third criteria here, still on the governance. We're saying that the institution's governing body and senior administrators have appropriate qualifications and experience for their positions and roles, including persons designated for leading the distance education initiatives. So these standards are very, very specific to the role of distance education. So how do we know that? What are the indicators? That governing body and senior administrators will have sufficient knowledge and experience in varying aspects, all right? From the education to the administration to the finance, teaching, learning, all aspects that support the core business of teaching and learning and assessment, as Professor Morrison would say. Okay? And that the governing body will demonstrate the ability to oversee the operations, including the delivery. So we are holding all institutional leaders accountable, all right? We want to see to the job description, the manuals, operational plans, but performance evaluations also of our senior leaders, all right? 360-degree. Satisfaction survey results, and especially the last 2-3 years and 3 months, it means how our institutional leaders have been communicating amidst the chaos, amidst the uncertainties, amidst the turmoil, but keeping the ship steady. The next standard under governance is that the institution would have clearly stated fiduciary responsibilities to be fulfilled by the governing body to assure integrity in its operations related to distance education. So yes, we will have the statements of the fiduciary responsibility that tends to go with every, important document of the institution. But we are saying that there will be ethical standards, there will be all actions in good faith with a reasonable degree of care for the finances and the legal requirements of institutions. Other indicators, conflict of interest, where there are conflict of interest policies and ensuring then that our leadership adheres, okay? And that there are legal provisions to protect the intellectual property rights of staff and learners with specific references to distance education. And so at the time we wrote this, we may not have put a lot in every standard related to data protection, but that is a central part of what we now have to consider moving forward. So there will be a criteria that deals with that. We will not look at it necessarily today, but it is the overarching one of technology support. Okay. So when we look at all the areas of governance, take a time and you check off, are we excellent? Are we performing at an acceptable level, or is there room for improvement? I'll just continue looking at the second and the third criteria, and then we'll have a discussion, because no criterion operates just by itself. They're all interrelated. And so we're just taking the time to be sure that we hear, we understand, and above all, that we appreciate the input that has come in over the last 2 years, because these standards were circulated, as Dr. Barrett had mentioned today, consultation from 2020, and we've been looking at it. So we have heard and we have updated. So next we look at the criterion, that's number 6 of the 9 criteria, right? This one addresses human resource management, the people factor. So we are saying that the institution would have sufficient, qualified, experienced academic, administrative, technical, and support staff to meet its mission of effective and efficient services to learners. It's a total system approach. All persons have to be involved. So once again, let's get ready now to rate ourselves. Under this criterion, we look at the institution having a critical core of qualified full-time academic staff to take responsibility for program development, delivery management, and related academic issues, right? And we're talking in the distance learning context where most institutions now have to be, or the online blended approach. So does our human resource policy and plan reflect clearly established guidelines related to qualifications and experience? Do we have the qualified staff to oversee the instructional environment? Are our academic staff members also qualified in online instructional delivery? And are they proficient in the use of instructional tools for the management and delivery of courses? And I know, Executive Director, we will say the change was sudden, we're still working on it, 2 years, 3 months. But the important thing for UCJ is that we're working on it. And there must be some clear plan from the Human Resource Policy Directive. And so there are several artifacts there that we would seek to put together to say at the point of accreditation, yes, we're on our way. Next, we look at the critical core, qualified full-time staff who have to take responsibility for program development, delivery, management, and related issues. So, okay, sorry. Okay, sorry, we did do that one. So let's go to the documented staff development policy and procedures. I know this is an area of struggle for many of us, okay, to really lay out clearly during this pivot, right? How quickly were we able to adapt policies and do all of that? Because we had to keep the ship afloat. So we are saying there must be a clear indication that staff members have been provided with opportunities for ongoing training in the use of the instructional approaches and the instructional technology, and policies too, and that the staff members are appropriately oriented and trained to provide instruction in a distance learning environment. So we will look for the evidence of training, but training does not mean just being in a webinar for 2 to 3 hours. Those of us who are trainers and instructional designers, we now have to look carefully at what persons can do. So it is competency-based training that we have to highlight. If you have been online and gotten the recording, what are you able to do? And will your students experience the difference of you being in that environment? So it cannot be that we are trying to show 90 slides in 60 minutes to get through. It must be that the training has spoken to engagement, interaction, and other aspects for good teaching and good relationship. So yes, the registration certificates and the manuals and all of that will be there, but ultimately the teacher evaluation report and the course evaluation report, okay? So quite a bit to chew on there for human resource, not exhaustive, but quite a bit if we start there to make sure we're in good standing. We go next to the, okay, so we go next to, all right, I may have affected the feed. All right, we are at financial management criteria 7. All right, this is a third of the area I'm looking at today. And so we want to look at institution that has systems for sound financial management, evidenced by current audited financial statements, showing financial viability, and that it can meet its financial obligations to provide quality distance education programs and services. So that is the standard And I know, again, we are struggling, but we are on a journey. And I say we struggle because I am aware that during this time, even the ability of our students to pay, okay, and all the systems that we have to go through and the completion, even for them, you know, getting student loans and wherever else they get support. And being online doesn't make it any easier. We may say they don't have to travel and they may not be eating lunch, but they still have to access devices and they still have to find money. And so we are aware that there is a struggle of our students to pay fees. Nonetheless, the institution is held accountable for the procedures that it would have in place for distance education, that it will comply with the requirements of national financial regulatory bodies. So we will look at the financial statements relating to the distance education operations, and these must be clearly enunciated, where possible, not lost in just the general operations of the organization, but there must be in alignment, in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles, and that the procedures are clearly stated and adhered to by the institution. So from the corporate strategic plan, all the requisitions, the entire financial systems, and the type of approved budgets must comply with good practices. Trying to advance here, okay. So next we look at the safeguards that the institution would have in place to prevent unauthorized access to online and on-site financial information. This is key to the Data Protection Act. And although we will expand on that in another section of the criteria, because it is under the governance financial management side, we have to also ensure accountability. And so, is our internal auditing mechanisms in place? We have an external audit schedule for all the online operations for distance education. And I know a lot of institutions had to pivot because our students are not all physically coming on campus to go over to the cashiers, to go over to your accounts office and all aspects. So if all payments are online, do we have the appropriate auditing mechanism? Do we have the controls in place and the trails to ensure finances? Remember the relationships with the various financial institutions, whether it be the banks and the credit unions, all of that, all those relationships will come under scrutiny. Do we have security systems in place to deter theft, sabotage, or other threats relating to the online operations? And so we are held accountable. The security policies, the data protection policy, all the audit documents. And so this is why I say leadership is very important and the expertise to guide our institutions in this regard. And so the institution, as a third area, I jumped a bit. Uh-oh. Right, the institution has to demonstrate that current and future budgets are sufficient to accomplish the mission, the goals, and the approved activities. That's the integration. We were talking about financial management, but all the other aspects on the governance, on the human resource management, everything has to be integrated. So the annual budgets are prepared and approved. They must have inputs from all the areas and persons who support online distance education. So artifacts of evidence are also there in terms of the financial allocations, the resource allocations to adequately meet the need of distance education. A famous quote I'm remembering from the UCJ is that the institution must now take stock of its potential for distance education and ensure that the adequate investments in curriculum development and the technology infrastructure are in place. I know it by heart now, right? Because I know we are being held accountable on that. All right. So, folks, we have just looked at 3 criteria And I hope as we went along, you were assessing where your institution or where you as a leader of the institution can be rated on that. So what we're going to proceed, we're just going to continue talking about the standards, but we're going to look a little bit at the interpretation of it. We're going to look at the areas for improvement. We're going to look at overall the type of involvement and integration for application in our different scenarios, because no one size fits all, no one standard in one sense fits all. You have to adapt and customize it to your setting, but ensure that you are seeking to meet the standard. This graphic here is saying to us that there may be some attempts to have the instructional person, the person who was holding it together in the face-to-face environment, now move online and simply be the perfect online teacher who is now balancing like a one-man band, right? So if you go clockwise with me from 1 o'clock, you're doing the creative publishing, getting the content together and everything. You're also, as the perfect online teacher, balancing the information management aspects, things you were maybe not as exposed to before, but now you're put in the environment, you have to jump in and you have to keep everything going online. And while you're doing that, you have to think about the pedagogy and the andragogy that suits online, because you can't just take the same face-to-face approach and the content and just plop it online and just continue working through. When I say you can't, we have been doing that and we have seen what the students are saying. So as we look at the entire graph, so we are balancing web access, but we know there's need for a new paradigm. We know there are skill sets for the 21st century that we have not been able to maximize. And when all of that is happening, we have home to balance, because many of us have been in our home environments over the past 2 years, facilitating students across the system, but still keeping our own children or relatives balanced at home and juggling everything and ensuring that the rabbit is fed and the pussy is putting thing and the dog is that, and we're balancing everything, yes, and being online while vehicles are passing outside and you hear the noise. So you begin to get the conundrum that this perfect online teacher is attempting the impossible. And no, we laugh, but many of us have been experiencing it. And so the purpose of the standards is to help us to break it down and to look item by item and to find the functional units that are responsible and to work together as a team to ensure that we can do the best. So best in governance, best in human resource, and best in the financial area. So I pause. Where are we now? We just listed quite a number of standards. Reading them by themselves, they may sound boring. But when you begin to think of how they have affected us, the lack of it thereof, or the existence, but just at a bare acceptable level, it means then we have to set a baseline, which is what standards do, and then determine for the next few years how we are going to execute the plan. Because I'm sure I've worked or had enough associations with UCJ to know that it is not tomorrow morning that UCJ expects you to have everything in place, but you must show evidence of being on the journey. So where are you now? The ratings that you had, excellent. Where are you in all of that? Where are you? Are you good? Do you have good practices? Are you fair, just getting there with all else that we had to balance? All right? So that's the important dialogue that we need to look at. I wanted to just share this diagram also with us. It's from McKinsey, 7S model for organizational change, because I found it very helpful to appreciate that there are components of a system, but they all have to interrelate and be aligned because anything that shifts out of the balance affects everything else. And so what the online distance environment is doing is forcing us to move from our silos and move from our solid areas of expertise to now admit that we all do not know. We all have uncertainty. We all have been going through what I would call VUCA moments in organization development language. We have had a volatile experience. We have had to pivot quickly. We have uncertainty. There is confusion and there is ambiguity. But as we look here, we can have a vision. And so if we do not have the shared vision, shared values, the shared mission, and understood in the organization, and that came under the governance, it's one thing to have it nicely bound in a manual, but if everyone doesn't understand and live it, it shows up in the online distancing world. And so as we look quickly clockwise from 12 o'clock, we're saying the structures must be in place, clearly defined structures. We had that in our standard. And we must have the systems, the financial, the human resource systems, the technology systems, the student support systems, the faculty support systems. And we must have a clear leadership style, a clear participatory approach where persons can feel comfortable enough to say, I do not know, but I want to find out. And to be able to come to the table and to work through the issues. And I'm speaking from personal experience because once we went into the environment, the first thing was, because I wear the hat in distance learning at University of Technology, Jamaica, it was, what are we going to do? And of course, I was also being asked questions about areas that I had not been involved in before. So we all had to come together because it hit us all together, okay? And so we have to have the type of style where it's not just top down, although we're talking to top tier leadership, but a lot that we learn from the persons who are responding to the calls that are coming. So I had the fortune that one of my admin assistants was able to tell me a lot and give me examples of what we could put in place to support students, because she was hearing it every day on the phone. We can't find, so where do we go now? Because remember, we had a walk-in campus and then we had to pivot to only some people or none at all on the campus. And so we had to put in different support mechanisms and we all weren't prepared. COVID caught us all off guard. So we have to look then at the staffing and how we equip and reskill and retool. What are the skills that are now needed in the 21st century? We had heard about them before because many of us had distance education offices and units and online units established. But now it is real, it is in our face. And we have to take the time to plan. So the institutions that are surviving, that are moving beyond survival, are those who may have been thinking ahead and they had some systems, but the others who were quickly able, using VUCA again, to have vision, to have some understanding and clarity of the mess we were in, and to be able to communicate and to clarify, and then to begin moving with agility. Not perfection, but for each day's disruption, which continue to come. I don't know about you, but I continue to have disruption. Sometimes I'm embarrassed because as far as I'm concerned, my system is set up, my bandwidth is coming in and all of that, and I'm speaking and I'm cracking up and people are saying to me, they can't hear me. And I'm saying, okay, what else do I do? And you realize that you are now dealing with a system and a world where we are no longer in control of everything. In fact, we had fooled ourselves, right? When we're in the face-to-face environment as a teacher, you're in the environment, and I use this example often. It rained or JPS light went, and you simply took the class outside under the tree. Now we're in the environment, what do we do? So what's the strategy? And in fact, in the online environment, we have to plan, have a backup plan, and have a backup plan for the backup plan for the plan. And even when you do all of that, everything is still shifting on you because we do not control all the variables. And we see it and hear it every day in the environment. And we may be seeking, so we're blaming the ministry, we're blaming the technology providers, we're blaming. We all have to come together and we all have to appreciate that it's a learning now for all of us together as a nation, as a region, and as a globe. So the standards serve as a guideline, as an indicator, as a measure, a benchmark, a way of helping us to identify what are some of the things that we have to address. And this little diagram is just to show you that it all has to hang together. There has to be alignment across all areas. So you can't just leave it for the distance education people over there or the online people to do it and come to you with a plan. So all of us now have to embark on transition or change management plans because life is no longer the way we know it. So here is what faces us now each day. Because we're talking quality standards, that's the byline. And so this is my case study and this is the test for my institutional leaders, right? How dare me put an assignment for the institutional leaders. But here is a test. And I will maybe just ask one or two persons in the room here, where do they start? I don't know if we'll get any feedback from those online. Somebody's monitoring the chat. But here is the case. Mrs. Heron, the executive director, here is the case study, right? And I'm picking on you just to answer, but I draw your attention. Here's what faces us. How do we now use technology? Before we begin, I need to inform you that the computers in this row are not working. We didn't have time to fix them because we're in face-to-face environment and we didn't have to worry about it much. But now we have changeover. We can't even get computers from overseas, right? And some of us have computers and the charger port and this not working and we have to juggle everything. So the computers are not working. And some of the passwords are not being accepted by all the computers. So the technology now becomes the elephant in the room, right? Where are you going? So from a governance, financial resource management, or from a governance leadership approach, what is the first step? Where do we go from there? How, she says, before we begin. So before we begin, where do we consider? Where will we begin? How will we use technology? Because the lecture that I want to do today is about, staff development and how we use technology. So any takers from a governance leadership perspective? It's not a right answer. And in the online environment also, it's not one right answer for everything. We just want some ideas. So is there anybody who can volunteer? I know that persons don't have mics, so I will just repeat. Or is there somebody? Okay, good. We have mics. Is there, look in the online space, can anybody help me solve this puzzle? Can anybody help me to solve this puzzle? Any takers in the room? Where do we begin? Because the computers are not working, the passwords are not being accepted, and we need to have instruction delivered, and we have a group of 2,000 students waiting. Where do we begin? Not rhetorical, it's serious. It has faced many of us. Any takers? Well, just a second, get the mic, All right, all right. So one respondent in our room here has said the IT team. Let's start with the IT team to fix the things. Yes. All right. That's an answer. Yes.
I would turn to my students and I would say to them, this is a challenge we have. You're all bright students, you're with it. So come on, let's come up with some ideas about how to fix this. What alternative devices can we switch to make classes happen today?
Okay. Yes. And any third person? All right. So
certainly sometimes what
we
would do is, if we anticipate challenges, students would do the equivalent of carpooling. So perhaps 3 or so students will pool around the same device. So
Okay.
one student would be logged in, but 3 students would be benefiting from the information.
Yes. All right. So we have heard from the IT team. We have heard from the instructional person getting in touch right away with the students and rallying and communicating to say what is happening. And then we have a third person who would be looking at the students themselves who may need to carpool and go somewhere else to just access. All right. So we have 3 online. What is happening online? Just share some of those for me, please.
We have some participants online who are sharing with us, and one of them is they're saying,
sorry, yeah. Can you see it? All right, give Mrs. Heron the mic. She's able to
you
read
seeing
it.
it, Sarah?
Yeah, she's seen it.
Okay, so Nicole Williams said, find out who has personal devices. Damian Fagan said, share computers that work.
Yes. Okay. So folks, what I want to just point out to you of what you have just experienced. We just had a quick brainstorming. There's no one right answer, but there are certain responses that will take priority order. And I learned from a colleague of mine who was then the Dean of College of Health Sciences. I knew the word before, but she always spoke about triage. Let's get together. So what we would have just experienced in the organization is a gathering from all the areas, whether experts or non-experts, but coming together, stakeholders, affected persons, to say what is happening from their end. So the students are waiting. The computers are broken down. We need the IT team over here. We need the students to be able to move quickly to another location. And all of that now has to be coordinated and managed, which is a sign of leadership. So the leadership will gather all the inputs, which we did on March 13, 2020. We all had to do it. I remember that date. I'm into dates, right? I'm into that date because we all had to shut down, at least for 2 weeks. All right. So the point is, where do we begin? And what I liked, and I'm glad the answer came, was that we have students waiting on us because we may be at the institution or not at the institution. We know that as we're about to initiate the class, things are not happening. And so what we need to do is to manage the expectations of people who are there waiting. What has hit us, Dr. Moore, in this whole period is the WhatsApp. Because there was a time our institutions did not approve WhatsApp and social media to be part of the day-to-day interactions, communication systems, because, you know, our students would go off on different things or so. But guess what has happened now? It has become the mainstay to reach out to persons when things are going good or bad, but you get the communication out. So communication is critical in all of this. So it's not perfection. It's going to take you time, yes, Mr. Tajay, to fix the computers. And maybe there are no more computers to be had. March 13, 2020, many of us were now jumping to say, everybody has to be resourced. Everybody has to, and there were not many computers in the island. So that is going to take time. And then the carpooling and all of that, you have to first find out who have cars, and then you have to arrange it. And so there are a number of factors to consider, and we have experts who can manage the time and the order. But I just wanted to show you that in the short term, we were all faced with this. Now the question is, have we learned from the experience? So the sign of leadership is now to learn the lessons from now and then plan strategically for different scenarios. Because remember, we're still in an uncertain, violent, or volatile, confusing, ambiguous world. It's not just about Jamaica or lack of resources or level of development. Yes, that aggravates the issue. But even in developed countries, there are challenges. They don't have the resource, they don't have the resource. What we will then have to do is using the UCJ guides, standards as a guide, to look at all the components in the jigsaw puzzle and to then determine how we are going to plan and resource it. Because all of us do not have the full bandwidth that we want and the full technology systems and support systems and everything perfect. And even if we did as institutions, our students and our instructors and all tutors and everybody else, if they are remote, They don't have everything. Neither do we control everything, because we also have to depend on other entities to supply us. So it's a total system approach. You can't just fix one side over there. You can't just dabble into online distance learning. And I'm emphasizing online because that has become the modality, right? When some of us started distance, there was no online, or it was, you know, a little bit. So you can't just dabble in it. And let's try it for now until, all right? Because if the good Jamaican parlance, COVID still a keep, God forbid. And other things are happening across the world. So we have to pay attention to how that is. So how do we move forward in this uncertain world, but with standards and guides, and as a team? What just happened in here and online was a team approach. Not as a group, but we were jumping in to work through the issue, because the disasters and everything are really equal opportunity abusers. None of us spared. So we all have been affected. We all have to be involved in resolving it. And so next time I come back with that case study, I know we will have leaders who are on top of it, right? That's one of the opportunities in online learning. We can do progressive instruction and teaching, where you can share something and you go through and you ask persons to be offline. We don't have to be online for all sessions. And we ask people to do their research and they come back. And we ask them the same question in week 1, and we can come back week 7, and we can come back week 10. So Prof. Morrison, I am paying attention to the assessments, because we cannot do things the way we have always done it. We're not asking about recall. We could say, could anybody remind me of the picture that I just showed? I had shown, and what were the elements in that picture? No, we have a problem to solve. And everyone, including our students, living, breathing, walking in those experiences each day. So, as I wind up, what I want to ask here is consideration for how we will move forward. Just some suggestions here as we look at the standards. Just ideas as to where we could start and who we bring into the room and how we go about addressing all of this. So we have numbered them, but it doesn't mean in your priority order that it has to be that way. But I'm just going to ask persons to consider. One of the first things I suggest, just my humble advice and experience, is get all the online champions in your institution and in your network together right away. Those who have a passion and a vested interest in seeing it happen. Notice, I didn't say all those who are qualified or necessarily expert, or those who have necessarily experienced it. What I'm suggesting is all those who are champions. They will commit to seeing this through. They will be in the trenches to work with us carefully to see it. Because that group is a group that will learn. That's a group that will not be caught up with, you know, feeling that we are not, you know, we don't know what we're doing, so we're not confident, so we cannot fix it all, because we're not trying to fix it all in one go. What we're trying to do is just to work through the problems the way we have them. Okay? Then notice who I have suggesting as second. Bottom row. To have a senior leader as a driver. So it is not that the senior leader has to be the expert, but the senior leader, I use driver even more than champion. The senior leader has to take ownership, and we have to know that there's some accountability in the organization for all that is happening. So the senior leader, being senior, will be able to coordinate and pull together the respective persons, including the champions. Then notice, thirdly, we must have the core experts. Let's find the persons who have studied it, have researched it, are qualified, but also who have experienced it. But there may be some persons who have experienced it who have not researched it. So it's a core group of experts. We put everyone together because as higher education institutions, as universities, this is what we espouse, that we're going to do the proper research and exploration and environmental scanning and come up with the solutions and problem solving. This is what we teach. So here we are faced with live problems now, all right? And I quickly want to move on to the campus connections. This is one field in which the competition is not the priority, because in some respects, we're all in the same boat. Some moving a little ahead. And I have had the good fortune over nearly 20 or 30 odd years to be able to work across the system. And in distance education, we have always had a network across the institutions that were hitherto seen as competitive. And we have always had to come together and say, hey, what is happening over there? This is happening over here. Is it the same? And we talk. Okay. All right. Then awareness of the standards. I have put awareness of the standards a little bit down because if you don't have the group together, you don't have a senior leader. And so then you just have a document, which you can get from the UCJ headquarters or so, but you have a document. What are you going to do with it? So you have to have persons who, when they know, having received the document today, official document, this is a final version for now, for 2022, you know, are able to pull together the champions, pull together the experts and say, how are we going to do this in terms of the transitions? What are the new skills? That's the next level. What are the new skills that have emerged during the disruptions? And what are the new skills that we will need for the ongoing disruptions? So that we can be agile, so that we can be prepared, so that we do not face again the same extent and sort of dismay and panic that may have happened in 2020. And quickly, the benchmark and the benefits. So having had the standards, we now begin to look across the spectrum in Jamaica, in the region, and across the globe for the emerging good practices. Who has been able to take the standard and look at it, apply it, assess themselves, and show that they are able to demonstrate it. So you need the live cases, you need the live accounts, because it's better to hear from somebody who has been through it and been honest about the struggle, and then learn that we don't have to repeat the struggle. So we will need persons who are willing to share, expose, but to be proud that in failure, in trials, there is learning. And that's what we call the organization learning. All right? And to document it, we don't have a lot of research papers about what went wrong, what didn't work. And I can tell you, in this technology environment, as we have all experienced today, yesterday, and the day before, and tomorrow, there will be things that do not work, that baffles us. Okay. And then the last one I want to mention here is the incentives for the stakeholders. Because all of us are complaining that never have we worked so hard. There's the expectation of instant response. Somebody reminded me that we had working hours, so you knew that if you tried to get somebody 5 minutes past 4 or 5 minutes past 5 and you were getting them, you say, okay, they may be driving, they're on the way home, they're taking the bus, or whatever. Or in the morning before 8 o'clock, you say, okay, you know, person has reached here, because there was a sort of respect, 8 to 5. Although leaders will tell you, you don't know time. No, I don't know if you're experiencing, but what I'm experiencing is 7 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the night, And depending on where you're calling from, because although I may say 7 o'clock in the morning, certainly if you're in India or elsewhere, you may have different time zones. And I've been guilty because I have been really across the globe and something not happening and I get locked out and I had to call somebody and say, excuse me, I know I'll wake you, but I'm on the university's business and I need to be able to do that, right? So I thank God for the Mr. Christians and the technology team of UCJ. All right, so folks, what I'm saying to you is that this whole aspect of standards is real, it's alive. And it is before us now, and we cannot hide our heads in the sand any longer. That we need help, but help is here. Help is here in terms of standards, in terms of quality benchmarks. But help is also here in terms of a UCJ that is not policing us, but looking to us to tell the story of how are we managing. A UCJ that has, with the support and sponsorship of Commonwealth of Learning, put on today's webinar. We'll also have webinars on Monday morning and afternoon. A UCJ also that if you look now at the website from when we did the consultation 2021, you have cases. You have institutions who were willing to come and share about what they were going through. And many more will be there, and we want to encourage the stories. And let me pause and just say, Commonwealth of Learning in particular, of which we are members as it is. All right? The largest intergovernmental agency across the world involved in this dance. I'm putting a plug because when you go to their website, cases, whatever it is you're trying to find out, and cases across the entire Commonwealth. Cases, India, Africa, Australia. So we can see ourselves in somewhere there. And Jamaica, let me not overlook. We have put cases in the Caribbean where our cases are out there too. So I just want to share that it is possible to navigate this environment, but not overnight. It is possible to find partners, to share, exchange, and even now to ask questions. So there may be some questions coming into the chat. It is possible to operate, to live and to breathe in a world that is still uncertain, that is still confused. And in fact, without us realizing it, Jamaicans have been able to make sense of chaos and to chart paths hitherto unknown. So the rallying cry is there that we can make this happen. We can make the standards work for us. We can lift them from off the paper. We can put together the teams that must now be in place with some dedication. We cannot do all the other business as usual and still try to work through all the standards. If you look at some of the best practices of the North American universities, not only did they set up, say, a quality assurance department, which most of us may have, but they also set up teams for transition and for change management, because that is one of the areas that we really lack in. So here we have the standards, but here we are today. The computers all broken down before us, no passwords. How do we move from here to what the standard espouses? What is the change strategy? Who are the change managers to help us navigate the uncertainty and the resistance? The resistance, because today, 2 years, 3 months later, we do have persons in our institutions who are saying, not really ready for the online, are waiting for face-to-face to return. All right? But as we watch the globe, we're saying it will not return to anything you knew before. The normal has changed. And our students are now saying, why do you want me to come into the campus for everything? First, when it started in COVID, they were saying, but we need to get back because we need social interaction. We need to be there. Now what I am hearing is we want to choose. we are now, I heard it literally, we are now better able to finance our education because we have been able to have jobs during this time. Leaders, how do we plan that and factor that now into the new normal? And Prof, remind us about assessment. We are going to talk about assessment on Monday. But for now, everything, assessment comes in every way. So from the governance, leadership, human resource, and financial management side, we have to make the investments in the assessment systems that fit this environment. We have to invest in new curriculum strategies where you're not trying to put everything face-to-face online and then assess it, because you don't know who's on the other end. Professor Morrison reminded us of that this morning. And we have to put the investments in the human resource personnel, not just instructors, because there's a whole team that supports the enterprise now. UCJ, one of the biggest areas we have is really attracting and maintaining our technology experts in education. Because why would a technology graduate come to work in educational institution when you can have a lot more rewards and so in the corporate entity? So the partnerships maybe between the corporate entity and the education, we will have to look at. So folks, I'm just sharing, having lived it, but very excited about the future still and wanting us to work together. And that just to remind us that today is just another step, beginning of the official implementation now. And that some resources have been provided here and that we will continue to explore it on Monday morning, Monday afternoon, and beyond. So it doesn't stop here. We're just beginning with UCJ and COL. So thank you very much for facilitating and being here today and facilitating my presence here.
Good morning, everyone. Present, good morning to those who have joined us at the R Hotel, and a special welcome and thanks to our participants who have joined us virtually. It is my task to provide the closing remarks for this session, and it is my honor to be entrusted with this undertaking at a gathering of such eminent individuals, both remotely and in person. We are not closing the door on this stimulating presentation and discussion. We have started today and we are going to continue on Monday. So this is part one of the webinar series where we're having that dialogue. And we also like to thank Dr. Bartley-Bryan for making that first presentation on the critical governance standards in the distance education standards document. Our minds and thought processes have been assailed by the rushing of ideas and information, the vision, and it will probably take a while before we can sift through them all to consider our own personal perspectives, given the practices in each individual institution. The webinar, no doubt, enhanced individuals and their collective thought processes regarding governance and strategic planning practices for distance education in the higher education institutions. As we have heard from the webinar so far, external quality assurance process begins with standards. Institutions are expected to develop their own internal quality assurance mechanisms. And the priority for leadership of all higher education institutions is to have their internal quality assurance systems in line with these standards. And today the focus is on the distance education standards. We at the UCJ anticipate that all applications for accreditation will include fully online programs. Therefore, adherence and alignment to these standards are necessary to facilitate accreditation. We also heard that the list of evidence stated in the standards aren't prescriptive. And as you know, that is something that we have always been saying, that our standards aren't prescriptive. They are a guide to help institutions in strengthening and developing their internal quality assurance mechanism. And we also heard that leadership is important in developing and implementing online distance education. Leadership is required to ensure that the requisite resources are in place to support online distance learning. Administrators must also focus on equipping practitioners with the resources required for seamless online education. We know there are challenges where funding is concerned, but the allocation of the available funds should be informed by the requirements of the practitioners as they seek to align the institution's practices with distance education to attain quality online interaction. As stated by Dr. Bartley-Bryan, this will benefit the institutions. So even though it is still early days, given that this is the first of 3 webinars, the other 2 will be held on Monday, June 20. I am sure you have all benefited in some way from this morning's session. And I would like to briefly, a number of overarching messages were just said. First of all, quality assurance requires adherence to standards. I don't think I can repeat that or overemphasize. We are operating in a new environment where there's more reliance on the technology. We have to ensure that our shared values are captured from all stakeholders throughout the higher education institutions. Online environment requires planning, risk management, flexibility, and change management. Also, leadership should use the experiences that they're going through now during the COVID-19 pandemic to plan and resource for future online distance education. And lastly, we have to pay attention to the assessments. And so the investment in the assessments and ICT systems, as well as investment in human resource professionals at the higher education institutions are important. I would like to also use this opportunity to thank the Commonwealth of Learning for their partnership and also express how grateful we are that they have joined us in hosting this launch of the standards, as well as the 3 webinar sessions, which are geared towards promulgating the standards which we have developed. So finally, on behalf of the Commonwealth of Learning, Distance Education Standards Committee, I thank you all. I thank Dr. Bartley-Bryan, who is the chairperson of the Distance Education Standards Committee. I'd like to thank the members of the Distance Education Standards Committee, as well as our Standards Development Officer, Mrs. Karen Gale. They combined both the committee as well as Mrs. Gale, who is also a member of the committee, have been working assiduously on getting these standards out. You may remember in 2020, during our Quality Assurance Week, that we used that opportunity to have a virtual consultation on these standards. And I'm now thanking you for your involvement and the feedback provided, because those comments, your suggestions, have been incorporated in these standards. So thank you again. And we look forward to having you join us on Monday, June 20 for the continuation. I sincerely hope that you have found this webinar beneficial. Thank you.
Thanks to Mrs. Althea Heron, Executive Director of the University Council of Jamaica. We will now hear from Mrs. Ritwa Smith online as she joins us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bartley-Bryan. Professor the Honorable Errol Morrison, Dr. Jeanette Bartley-Bryan, our most valued invited guests, ladies and gentlemen in the room at our Hotel Kingston, and those who have joined us online, good morning. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion on behalf of the University Council of Jamaica. Special thanks to the committed team from UCJ, which is led by the Executive Director, Mrs. Althea Heron, and Mrs. Karen Gale for spearheading the project. Thanks to the Commonwealth of Learning for the tremendous support provided to host and launch the webinars for today and on Monday, June 20, 2022. Thanks to the Distance Education Standards Committee, who were instrumental in the revision of the standards, especially Dr. Bartley-Bryan for her leadership and guidance as chair of the committee. Thanks also to Ms. Sandra Bloomfield for lending her years of expertise as project consultant. The planning committee expresses our sincere thanks to the following persons for their participation in today's event. Dr. Arlene Lawrence for setting the tone for the event by opening in prayer, Professor Errol Morrison for giving the welcome, Honorable Favour Williams and Dr. Marriott Newman for the greetings they shared, Dr. Dawn Barrett Adams for providing us with an overview of the standards, Jehu White from Excelsior Community College, School of Performing Arts for the musical item. Thanks to Ms. Tamika Wilson for introducing the presenter. Thanks to Dr. Jeanette Bartley-Bryan for chairing today's event and for her presentation to us that was well received and left much for us to reflect and act upon. Thanks to the higher education institutions who participated today and also in QA Week 2021, which focused on distance education. Your feedback and contribution have been reflected today. Last but by no means least, thanks to RT3 Media for their streaming services and the R Hotel for the room and the refreshment that they provided. Dr. Bartley-Bryan, ladies and gentlemen, an event like this cannot happen overnight. The wheels would have started rolling weeks ago. Events like these require planning and a bird's eye for details. We have been fortunate enough to be supported by a team of very motivated and dedicated colleagues of the University Council of Jamaica and personnel from other higher education institutions who know their job and are result-oriented. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. It has been a great pleasure.